Stalag Luft III, the most notorious Nazi prison camp of World War II. It holds Allied airmen who have already tried to break out of other POW camps. This one is designed to be different, escape-proof.
But one man is determined to escape and bring hundreds of airmen with him. He envisions a prison break so massive, it could destabilize the German front and turn the tide of the war against the Nazis. This man is 33-year-old RAF squadron leader Rodger Bushell.
Rodger Bushell was South African by birth. From an English family, he joined the Royal Auxiliary Air Force, and he was a squadron leader when the war began. Amongst his first assignments was to lead a unit of his squadron over to France to shadow the evacuation of Dunkirk. And Bushell's air war ended almost before it began because he was shot down relatively early in the day on one of his first missions.
Bushell was captured by Nazi forces, but no POW camp was able to hold him.
Rodger Bushell was one of the higher-ranking Air Force prisoners at the beginning, and that, coupled with his immensely strong personality, kind of propelled him to the front of the escape organizations.
Bushell is taken to the one place the Nazis know can hold him, Stalag Luft III.
It's considered escape-proof by the Nazi regime, but that doesn't scare Bushell.
As soon as he arrives, Bushell is already thinking about escaping. Bushell is in command of the escape committee, but now he needs an actual escape plan.
Tunneling is the most conventional and therefore the most expected means of escape. So he comes up with an audacious plan to simultaneously construct not one, not two, but 3 tunnels. The idea here being that if the Germans were to discover one tunnel and destroy it, it was highly unlikely that they would ever assume that 1 or 2 other tunnels of the same magnitude were being constructed at the same time.
The tunnels were codenamed Tom, Dick, and Harry. They wanted to make sure that the prisoners didn't go, "How's the tunnel going?" They might say, you know, "How's Dick today? How's Tom today? How's Harry today?"
Most prison breaks involve a dozen men. He proposes to free upwards of 200 POWs.
Rodger Bushell believed that an escape of 200, 250 airmen would create such chaos in Germany, such chaos within the Nazi regime, that it would have incalculable damage on the German leadership.
One of the most important things about the tunnels is the entrance. There was a Polish engineer who was flying with the RAF, and he had the capability of crafting concrete such as you've never seen. He was able to craft slabs of concrete which would act as the trapdoors. The one that's most ingenious is underneath a stove. The huts would have these stoves. They would sit on kind of like ceramic tiles so that they would be heat resistant. And what they realized was underneath that was also one of these piers. They could pierce down through and not be visible.
They figured out how the wood-burning stove could actually be running with a fire in it, and they could lean it back. Men could go down the hole, and they could put the stove back again and lean back and be reading a book and having a cup of tea.
Well, Bushell's instinct to dig 3 tunnels proves to be right. Not only is Tom Tunnel discovered, but the Nazis begin clearing trees for a camp expansion, ruining the exit site for the tunnel codenamed Dick. Tunnel Harry is now their only hope.
January 1944. The tunnel is nearly complete. Bushell and his men must now prepare disguises and fake IDs, or they won't get very far in the Polish countryside.
They had to make official documents somehow. They could steal documents. They could see what the documents were meant to look like. And some of these guys were incredibly artistic. So they would forge documents really well, and they knew how to make paper look old or make it look official. But one of the things they needed was an official stamp. And they figured out that they could take the leather off the soles of their shoes, and with tiny little scalpel knives that they managed to procure from somewhere, they could cut away a stamp, which they could then use to stamp the passport.
Bushell's forgery factory is in full swing. Then, in March 1944, the tunnel is completed. Only one thing remains to do: escape.
On March 24th, 1944, the go-ahead is given to escape.
As these men are getting checked off, they started now to go into the tunnel and move along it.
But when they finally do get through, a terrible surprise awaits them.
When they popped their head out to have a look around, they realized at that point
the tunnel wasn't long enough. They thought they were under the woods, but they weren't. So when they came up, they were only like 50 yards outside the prison, and they were right beneath one of the observation towers.
The decision is made to continue going. Though next to a guard tower, they are also next to a hideout. This becomes their shield from the towers. The sun begins creeping up over Stalag Luft 3.
4:45, we're getting towards the point where we're getting the leading edge of the men, the last men who would be possible to exit from that tunnel. And what we see then is 76 men have already exited the tunnel and are somewhere out there in the forest. And there are 3 or 4 men who are the last to emerge. And what has happened, of course, is that they started to be spotted. A couple of the guards caught sight of one of the prisoners and realized this is an exit point for the tunnel. We need to close this down. The 4 who had exited and had been captured were saying, you know, Nick Sheehan, don't shoot.
the majority of them were rounded up within 72 hours after the escape. A lot of them didn't get more than a few miles.
All POWs have the right to expect that so long as they are identifiable as a prisoner of war, that they would be retained as a prisoner of war. They may be punished by being put into detention or whatever, but they wouldn't have expected in any way to have been murdered, and that's what ultimately happened.
Rodger Bushell is one of the 50 POWs brutally executed under orders from Hitler.
So Bushell successfully got out of the tunnel. He was traveling by train, transferring from one train to another. His documents were closely examined. They were seen to be forgeries, and immediately Bushell was put into the hands of the Gestapo.
But his plan was not in vain.
Rodger Bushell's goal was to disrupt the German high command by flooding escapers through occupied Europe. In this, I think he succeeded more than he ever imagined. The news of the escape came to the daily conference at Hitler's headquarters, and you see from this point a growing descent in the highest ranks of the Nazi regime. And you can find people who were closely connected with the Great Escape aftermath, who clearly moved into an opposition to Hitler because they were disturbed by what went on in the aftermath of the escape from Stalag Luft 3.
Squadron leader Rodger Bushell persuaded his fellow prisoners that it was worth risking their lives to escape Stalag Luft 3. The goal was not freedom. The goal was to undermine Hitler. By ordering the execution of Bushell and 49 other escapees, Hitler played right into their hands. It opened a rift within Nazi armed forces, one that would never heal. Did it help end World War II? Some historians say it did. And that was all Rodger Bushell hoped for.